Hello, good morning, everyone. What a blessing to be once more together, all of us here, to learn a little more about Spiritism, about the teachings of Jesus, and to be here with guest speakers that have been contributing so much for us to learn and to expand even more our understanding about life, about the creation, and about all of those that have been so much dedicating themselves to help us and assist us from both sides of life. So before we start our presentation today, as always, we like to start with a prayer, and we will invite our João Cornigold to do the prayer for us this morning.
Morning. We close our eyes, we elevate our thoughts, we ask for the blessing and assistance and protection of the spiritual benefactors for our studies of this morning. We ask them to guide us, to inspire us, so we can all together be able to learn, to understand, and more important, to be able to put in practice on our daily lives all the teachings we are about to receive. We ask for the protection of the Spiritist movement in the world, that we may be all united in fraternal sharing of the teachings of our Master Jesus. We thank him for the guidance. We thank him for the assistance to each one of us. With our hearts full of gratitude, we ask permission to open our classes. So be it.
Thank you. So one of the blessings that we have been having due to the pandemic is exactly to be able to get to know more people, to be closer to people that before we didn't have that much chance. They live in different places, different countries, and this is the case with our dear Dr. Vicente Pessoa. I'm not going to say doctor anymore, just this once. So Vicente has been one of those discoveries for us, a new friend, a person that has been dedicating so much to these times, being able to enlighten us, not only in terms of spiritism, but also if we consider that he is a physician in terms of with a specialty in infectious disease, he can also, and he has been also helping us in this area as well to understand a bit more about everything that is happening. And he is currently the vice president of the Spiritist Medical Association of Goiânia, where he lives. But above all, like we said, is a new friend, an old friend, and someone very dear to our hearts. And that today has prepared to us a special talk, because he's going to be talking about one man that was very important during the time of Kardec, and that we don't talk that much about him, but we value tremendously the work that he has promoted during his time with Kardec and after that as well. But I will leave that to Vicente today to talk to us about the plurality of inhabited worlds from Flammarion to the present time. Welcome, Vicente. Thank you so much for being here. This morning I was thinking, well, let me try to translate it to the American people, how we would be calling Vicente in English, Vincent, right? But yeah, it's Vicente for us. Welcome.
Thank you, Jussara. Thank you, João. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I thank the United States Spirits Federation for this opportunity, for this chance to talk. It's not always that we have these opportunities to bring Spiritism knowledge in the English language. So I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate you all that work abroad, bringing the Spiritist message to those countries. It's really hard to spread this message in Brazil, so I can imagine how hard it is to spread this message in foreign languages, in foreign cultures. So I am a big fan of yours, and I ask Jesus to support and bless you all in this job. So, as you said, we are going to talk about a man that many Spiritists don't know very well. We are used to talk about Allan Kardec, Leon Denis, and even the great Gabriel Delany. But Camille Flammarion, he's been forgotten a little bit. And we don't really understand why. This man was a scientist, an astronomer, a French astronomer, and he was close friends with Allan Kardec. They spent some time together in the Parisian Spiritist Society founded by Kardec. They worked together there, and I keep imagining the dialogues they had, the conversations they had at that time, how rich they would be. I would like to go back in time and watch those men speaking, talking with each other, arguing, discussing, bringing new ideas, old ideas, and that would be a very rich experience. And Flammarion was somebody that believed in the immortality of the soul and in the plurality of the inhabited worlds. He was an astronomer, so he had great knowledge of astronomy, and he even wrote a lot of books about astronomy that where he was trying to make astronomy popular, make astronomy known by the population of France, Europe, and the world, because he believed that we would reach God through astronomy. He had a very strong sentence where he wrote, the astronomical philosophy will be the religion of the evolved spirits, because he strongly believed that astronomy would bring us closer to the notion that God really exists, because the universe is so beautiful, so organized, so huge, that only the presence of God could explain it. So I've been reading and searching about his life for a while, and I guess I have some information that could be new for many of the friends who are watching us now. So we are going to take you to a trip back in time. We're going to make this travel together, and I'm going to present some aspects of his life, some aspects of his ideas and his work, some aspects of his relationship with Kardec, and we are going to try to cross all those informations with what science is searching right now about other worlds, other planets, and life on other planets on the scientific way. So let's begin. I have my presentation set, so let's go. So some dates, so we can situate ourselves in time. Mr. Flammarion was born on February 26, 1842. When he was born, Allan Kardec was 38 years old, because Allan Kardec was born in 1804. So Allan Kardec was 38 years older than Flammarion. And Flammarion was born in a very small village in France named Montigny. It's a very small village, but it's really close to a bigger city named Langres. And he spent his childhood in Montigny, and his teen years, he spent part of them in this city called Langres, where he studied in a Catholic school, and he had the opportunity to study really deeply the Gospels, Latin, the language Latin, philosophy, geography, and all humanistic subjects in that city. The Spirits book was written by Allan Kardec in 1857, when Mr. Flammarion was only 15 years old, and he was still in Langres, because he arrives in Paris by the end of 1856, beginning of 1857, more precisely by the end of 1856, because he spent 3 years in Langres from 1853 to 1856. And his parents were already in Paris because they had to migrate from Montigny to Paris because of an epidemic of cholera who was responsible for their bankrupt. So they lost everything they had in Montigny, and they migrate to Paris, try a new life. But the young Flammarion, the young Camille Flammarion, was sent to a Catholic school in Langres so he could study, because it was cheap, because it was useful, and because he loved to study. So he was very precautious, he learned how to read and with 4 years old by himself. So he was kind of a genius, young kid who loved knowledge, who loved science since the early ages. So when Allan Kardec passed away in 1869, with 65 years old, Camille Flammarion was 27 years old. And this is a very curious information because, as we all know, Camille made a speech beside Allan Kardec's tomb. And he was invited by Madame Kardec, by Amélie, Kardec's wife, to do this speech. And he was only 27 years old. So when we read about this speech, we imagine a very experienced and mature man speaking those beautiful words. We are going to bring some of those words in our talk today, but he was only 27. He was not this mature and gray man. He was a young man. And Allan Kardec recognized that. And he treats him as a man with a very bright future in Spiritism. So he put a lot of faith in Camille, as we're going to see. And he passed away in 1925, just after World War I in the 20th century. So he lived 83 years. And there is a curious story about this as well, because we had an International Spiritist Congress who was held in July 1st, 1925. And Leon Denis was supposed to speak in the opening ceremony of this Congress. And Leon Denis did not want to do that because he was very sick. He was blind and he had a lot of difficulties. And he asked Geronimo, his guide, please invite Mr. Flammarion. He would be a very good speaker for this open ceremony. And Geronimo answered to Leon Denis that it would be impossible. Flammarion would not be available. And Denis did not understand that at that time, but the answer was because Flammarion was going to deincarnate before a month before this event, this Congress. So this is why Geronimo answered Denis that he should be the one speaking at the opening ceremony and not Flammarion. So this is a man that had the trust of Denis, and this is a man that had the trust of Kardec. So I see no reason for us to deny his teachings and his work, and not to learn from him, because we could learn very important concepts and ideas about the cross-section between science and religion, because he was a scientist. He had this look to Spiritism from the scientific perspective, and he was not easy to be convinced. He demanded evidence that those phenomena were real, and he was very demanding. And that's maybe one of the reasons, I believe, and my personal view on the subject, maybe this is one of the reasons that many spiritists believe that Flammarion, at some point, he could have denied the spiritist ideas, but that's not a fact. That's not true. He just demanded evidence. He was not fooled very easy. He didn't take for granted every spiritist phenomenon, because many of them were fraud, and we have evidence in this about this through history. He has a book where he writes a whole chapter about mediumship fraud, which is real. We have to take that into consideration. The phenomenon is real, but fraud always also happens. That was his idea, his beliefs. So with these dates, we can situate Camille Flammarion on time and his time relationship with Allan Kardec. So let's move on and bring some new information. So as a child, his mother showed him a solar eclipse that took place in France in October 1847. And he brings us this information that for a 5-year-old child, this fact cannot fail to produce a deep impression on the spirit. And for my part, I never forgotten it. So he brings us this information that when he was 5, he saw this solar eclipse, and he thought that phenomenon was so wonderful that he would like to study it deeply. He would like to become an astronomer. And he asked for his teacher for books about the subject. And his teacher brought him books about philosophers from the past who studied astronomy. So he had his first contact with the ideas of Ptolemy, with Nicolaus Copernicus, Johannes Kepler, and other astronomers when he was 5 years old, and he began to develop his ideas and his passion for astronomy from this early age. And he brings this information for us, written by himself. So that's a very important point. This pushed him in this direction of science and astronomy since an early age, and the hold that his mother had in this, because she was Catholic, very Catholic. She wanted him to be a priest, and she used to take him and his siblings to church. But otherwise, on the other hand, she would like them to study the phenomena of nature. So she put this big glass of water made by glass, obviously, so they could watch this eclipse safely. And she has credit for a lot of credit for who Camille Flammarion became in the future. So when he moved to Paris in 1986, he had a very hard life. He had to work during the day, take classes during night, at night, and he was hired. Many things happened in his life between 1856 and 1861. I will not get into detail on that. I have a video series of that in YouTube. You can watch what happened during those 4 years there, if you're interested. But in 1861, he was already working at the Observatory of Paris Observatory of Astronomy, as an internship. He was working there. And one day he was coming back home. And he used to stop at the Opera Theater in Paris, where scientific papers and books used to be published. New things about science were always being published at this theater. And this one day in September of 1861, when he got into the theater, he had the chance to take a new book that had been released 4 years earlier, 1857, which was Spirit's book. And when he opened the book, he had this look at this chapter about the plurality of inhabited worlds. And then he writes, well, it was precisely at that time that I was working on a book on this subject that would be released the following year, 1862. So this is one of those coincidences that we don't believe are coincidence at all. And this book was the Spiritist book by Mr. Allan Kardec, chapter 3, questions 55 to 58, which are the following questions. Are all the globes spinning through space inhabited? Is the physical composition of all the different globes the same? Since the physical composition of the various worlds is not the same, do the beings inhabiting them have a different physical organization? Do the worlds farthest from the sun lack light and heat, since the sun would appear only as a distant star to them? So that called his attention because his book was exactly about that. And he had the desire to meet that man who wrote that book. And that man wrote in the beginning of that book that the book was written by spirits. And that called his attention because he was young, but he was about 20 years old, 19 years old, but he was already this great spirit, well prepared from, we believe, past lives, with a lot of knowledge of science. He had written his first book with 15 years old about the world before the creation of man. And I have this book here from 1852, my edition, but the book was written in 1857 when he was only 15. It's a big book. So for a 15-year-old kid, knowing about geology and sciences and a very hard work to do. So he wanted to talk with that Allan Kardec about that. And that's what he did. Then he introduced himself to Allan Kardec and then became friends. And he worked with Allan Kardec in the Parisian Spiritist Society for 2 years. Every Friday night he was there. And he worked as a medium, and he brought some messages from another famous astronomer, Galilei, which Allan Kardec put in Genesis, as we are going to see. So he had a great influence in Kardec on this subject, as we are going to see soon. So this is the story how they met. And this is the book, The Plurality of Inhabited Worlds, that he wrote when he was 19 years old. And the first sentence of the book, in the first page, already impresses us a lot. It is enough to look carefully at the current state of mind to realize that man has lost faith in security of ancient times, that our time is a time of struggles, and that restless humanity is waiting for a religious philosophy in which it can invest its hopes. So I keep wondering, what was I doing when I was 19 years old? And what Flammarion was doing when he was 19 years old? And he brings us this very deep idea of a new religious philosophy, which was necessary to bring hope to the heart of humankind. And that's very mature for a 19-year-old, and very deep philosophically, very deep theologically. And he found the right person in Kardec, so he could spread his ideas about the plurality of inhabited worlds. So he keeps saying that perhaps when reading these lines, one will wonder what relationship exists between plurality of the worlds and religious philosophy. And many people would not believe in this correlation. For those who think that way, who do not believe in this correlation, They should change their minds and believe that plurality of the worlds is an idea that is at the same time scientific, philosophical, and religious of the highest importance. And by the end of our talk, we will understand what he meant exactly by that, how important it is philosophically, scientifically, and religiously. What consequences this idea could bring to our mind, to our lifestyle, to our daily lives. So this is really deep for a young man this age. These ideas were so important that Allan Kardec wrote a paper about this book and about the ideas in this book in the Revista Espírita, Spiritist magazine. I don't know how to say that in English, but Revue Spiritique in French, in 1863. So the opinion of Allan Kardec from this book is summarized in this text. From our side, we finish with one observation. It is remarkable to see the wisdom contained in that book and the fact that they come from a young man at an age where his peers are still in school. It is even more impressive to see him presenting those ideas with such profound insight. This work demonstrates that his spirit is not in an early stage, or that he is unknowingly being assisted by other spirits. So this is the word; those are the words from Allan Kardec, proving that he believed in Camille Flammarion, in his ideas, and he supported his ideas. And this was a highway of two ways, because Flammarion also supported Allan Kardec and believed in him, as we are going to see on the next slides soon. So when he was speaking by Allan Kardec's tomb at the Père Lachaise cemetery, he called Kardec master and friend. And he thanked Kardec for the support he gave him about his ideas. You were the first, oh, my master and friend. You were the first who, from the beginning of my career in astronomy, displayed a profound affinity for my deductions regarding the existence of celestial humanities. Taking into your hands the book The Plurality of Inhabited Worlds, you placed it at once at the base of the doctrinal edifice that you dreamed about. And that's pretty much true, because the plurality of inhabited worlds are one of the pillars that gives Spiritism its logical conclusions and its strength. So this is one of the main concepts of Spiritism, one of the main ideas, which is consequence of the immortality of the soul, with reincarnation, and so on. So Kardec took those ideas and put them in Genesis, one of the 5 basic books of Spiritism. On chapter 6, as we're going to see, those ideas that he brought through mediumship and were signed by Galileo. So this is very important. This is a proof that about the respect of he had to Allan Kardec and otherwise, and what the respect Kardec had for him. So this is the chapter, General Uranography, which is chapter 6 of Genesis, a very important chapter in this book, where Galileo is going to talk about the creation of the world, creation of the planets, creation of the galaxies. He's going to talk about space, about time, about space-time. And this is 1860s. And those ideas were not very well known by astronomy, by official astronomy at that time. So those ideas, they are pretty much in accordance with what we know right now in the 21st century. So it was very brave from Flammarion to bring those ideas, and in very how can I say that, very innovative, something very new for that time. So this brings us the pioneerism that Spiritism brings us in many aspects of science and life. So he studied the past astronomers like Copernicus, and he brought from Copernicus the idea of the sun being the center of the universe and not the earth, as it used to be believed in the past. So he had great knowledge of the ancient astronomers, and he put that in his work. He also studied very much the work of Galileo Galilei, who also believed that the sun was the center of the universe, and was arrested by the Catholic Church, and he was punished, and he had to deny all his knowledges in order to stay alive. So there are very similarities between the work of Flammarion and Galileo, and we would like to bring some of them so we can have an idea how similar the ideas of both men were. Those are drawings of the moon made by Galileo Galilei, the original ones, and he was proving that the moon was not a perfect sphere. The moon had mountains, had valleys, and had depressions, and so on. So this was the first thing that bothered the Catholic Church, because Catholic Church thought that the worlds were perfect spheres, and Galileo showed that the moon was not perfect. He also showed that not everything was spinning around Earth, because when he developed the telescope, he did not invent the telescope, but he developed the telescope to have power enough, enlargement enough to see other worlds. And he pointed that telescope to Jupiter, and he could see, as we can see in the picture, different positions of black dots around the white dot. So the white dot is Jupiter, and the black dots is the moon, are the moons, Jupiter's moons. And you can see that they are in different positions. And sometimes we even have 3 moons, sometimes we have 4 moons, because when we have 3 moons, the 4th one is behind Jupiter. We can't see it. So Galileo concluded that those little dots were spinning around Jupiter. So not everything was spinning around Earth. So Earth should not be the center of the universe. So Copernicus should be right. The sun should be the center of the universe. At that time, they believed the center of the universe, not the center of the galaxy, of the solar system. So this put Galileo in much trouble. But he did not deny his own ideas, and those are the moons, Europa, Io, Callisto, and Ganymede, which are today called the Galilean moons, because they were the 4 moons that Galileo could see with his telescope. So today we know that Jupiter has more than 60 moons. And another coincidence is that Europa is the moon that NASA is searching for life, which the more probability to have life, because they believe Europa has a big ocean behind the icy surface, and they are planning some missions for there, and we could have some news in the next 10 or 20 years about at least microbial life in Europa, which is very likely and very much possible. So those are the Galilean moons. And Galileo did not deny his work, and he wrote this book, Dialogue, and he created 3 characters, Salviati, Simplicio, and Sagredo. And Salviati means the salvation, the genius, the intelligent one, which was Galileo himself. Simplicio means simplicity, which was the church that doesn't know anything, doesn't know the truth. And Sagredo was an intermediate of the dialogue. And in the book, Salviati makes fun of Simplicio, of the lack of knowledge of Simplicio, and he brings these informations that the Earth was not the center of the universe, but the Catholic Church was not fooled by Galileo, and he was condemned by that, and he had to deny after that his knowledge and his ideas in order to stay alive. But the reason I brought this is because Camille Flammarion also wrote a book with a dialogue between characters. And this is the book, Narrações do Infinito, in Portuguese, but in English, you can find it, Lumen, The History of a Soul. And there were two characters, Quarens and Lumen was the interpretation of Camille Flammarion, and Quarens is a student, a disciple of Lumen, and Lumen brings his ideas about the survival of the soul, life in other planets. They travel to other planets together in order to know these planets and these ideas, and he plays in a very smart way with the notion, the idea of time, and it's a very elegant book. We had the chance to talk about this book twice with some friends in the internet, and it's very interesting, the ideas he brings. And a curious fact is that this book was published by Didier Editeurs, which was the man who published Kardec's book. Monsieur Didier. We can also see Monsieur Didier in the movie Kardec. He's present there. So he also published some of Camille's books, because the other ones were published by his brother, Ernest Flammarion, who created a bookstore who could sell and publish the books from his brothers, because there are so many. Flammarion wrote so many books with so much information that his brother made a living of it. And that's a very interesting information about the personal life of this man. So now we are going to take a trip of what science talks about other planets, life in other planets. So until 1781, only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 planets were known. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And it was only in 1781 that Uranus was discovered. And only in 1846, when Flammarion was only 4 years old, that Neptune was discovered. And Pluto came later. And right now, we don't even consider Pluto a planet. Poor Pluto. Poor Pluto. It's not a planet anymore. He's a dwarf planet right now. And we'll feel sorry about it, because we love Pluto very much. We were very surprised and very happy to see very nice pictures from Pluto from 4 or 5 years ago, from New Horizons, the spaceship New Horizons, who took pictures of Pluto and showed a heart-shaped surface, which made our hearts melt. So Pluto is not a planet anymore. But for us to have an idea, Johannes Kepler in 1609 described the orbits of the planet as elliptical. And Newton in 1687 brought the gravitation laws, and he brought those information to us so we can situate in time where we are here. So we can see how the knowledge of the planets progress through time. And we are only talking about our solar system, our star, the sun, and the planets who orbit around this only star. We're not talking about the billions and trillions and exillions stars in the universe. So this is what we knew at that time. And it was the work of this lady, a woman, Henrietta Leavitt, that made everything possible. She doesn't get the credit, which happens very often through history, because she was a woman, but she was the one responsible for the discovery in the register of more than 1,777 Cepheids, which are a special kind of stars that oscillate its light during time. So sometimes they are very bright, sometimes they are not very bright. And because of that oscillation, she was able to calculate the distance from Earth, the distance they were from Earth. And one day, she found a Cephid in the so-called nebula of Andromeda, which we now know it's a galaxy and not a nebula. And when she calculated the distance from that star at the nebula of Andromeda to Earth, she realized that that Cephid was 1 million light years away from us. And then she realized that that could not be inside the Milky Way. So there should be other galaxies besides our own, because this is a very important point. By that time, they didn't even know that the universe had so many galaxies. They thought the Milky Way represented the whole universe. So they didn't even have this kind of knowledge. And Flammarion is talking about life in other planets already. So that's pretty amazing. So when she calculated that this Cephid in the nebula of Andromeda was 1 million light years away, today we know that it is 2 million light years away. It's even further because math was adjusted. And but that does not take out her credit. She was great, and she should win the Nobel Prize, but she did not. She got 30 cents of money for each Cephid that she discovered at that time. So that's pretty poor on us. We should get her credit, but somebody did. Somebody did, as we're going to see. So there was this great debate in 1920. Flammarion was still alive. World War I was in course, just finished, about how to solve this problem. Was the universe made out of a lot of galaxies, or there was only one galaxy, our own, the Milky Way? So one scientist was on one side, which was Herbert Curtis, and the other one was on the other side, which was Harlow Shapley. And as we could conclude, in all debates, they did not get anywhere. So both had evidences that they were right. And the question was not solved in this great debate that made the scientific world very excited at that time. But who brought the solution? It was only in 1923 that the American astronomer Edwin Hubble, using Enriqueta Leavitt's work about the Cephids, could calculate that that star from the nebula of Andromeda was in another galaxy, because it was so far away. The Milky Way has 100,000 light years, and that star was 1 million light years away. So he calculated that, and he showed that other Cephids were in other galaxies, and the universe was constituted of so many different galaxies, and they were getting further away from each other. So the universe was expanding. So he concluded he was the one, and let me correct myself, he was one of the scientists that concluded that the universe was expanding. And if the universe was expanding, maybe sometime in the past, the universe was so compacted in a very tiny singularity that this singularity suffered a great expansion all of a sudden and gave birth to the universe. So he brought this idea. He was one of the scientists who brought these ideas about the Big Bang, the big expansion of the universe from a singularity, but that was only possible because of Henrietta Leavitt's work. Let's not forget that. So the great space telescope that the United States launched years ago, decades ago, has his name, and made great contributions for the study of the planets and the other worlds we can see. So right now, if we are very impressed by a picture took by the Hubble, which is considered the greatest picture taken by humankind ever. So this picture was made opening Hubble's lenses for more than 20 days in a direction of part of the sky that is as big as your thumbnail. So we can see that part in that square in the middle of the picture. It's the size of your thumbnail, and Hubble pointed his lenses to that direction for 20-something days. And what he saw was astonishing. And this is why it's considered the greatest picture of humankind. In that small space, this is what Hubble saw. And each point of light in this picture is a galaxy with billions and trillions of stars. So we can see in this picture more than 5,000 galaxies, only in that in that tiny piece of sky, in that little square. So that brings us to the idea of God. Who created that? How big is the universe? Can we deal with this information? Can our religion deal with that information? Don't we need a new philosophical, religious doctrine to explain that? To fulfill our heart with hope and comprehension? So this is an amazing picture. And after that, by 1995, science found the first exoplanet, the first planet that was going around a star other than the sun. So this planet was discovered in 1995, and he was named 51 Pegasi b. And from then to our time, the Kepler Space Telescope, designed to find other worlds, was able to find more than 4,200 planets. By March 2018, it had found 2,342 planets. By August 2020, it was the last time I checked, it had found 4,197 exoplanets, bringing us scientifically this idea that there are many worlds out there, and probably those worlds could be inhabited, as Flammarion described in many of his books, where he makes space trips in his dreams, during his sleep, and he brings descriptions of these worlds and their inhabitants to us. So I'm going to skip this just to show that this telescope, Kepler, is pointed to a tiny place in space where he could see more than 4,000 planets. Imagine if he could search the whole galaxy, how many planets would it find? And we have more to come, because in October from this year, and we are very excited and very anxious to see that NASA will launch the substitute of Hubble, James Webb Space Telescope, that will be able not only to see those worlds, but to study the atmosphere of those worlds. And we will have the chance to realize the chance of these worlds being inhabited, because imagine if you find oxygen on those atmosphere, and if you find molecules like chlorophyll, which is present in plants, which is able to see. So this will bring a revolution, and this is the great scientific achievement of our time, and we are very excited because this launch was postponed 3 times already, and maybe we will see James Webb Space Telescope in action after October 2021, a few months from now, and that's bring us very excitement and joy. So this is the size of his mirror comparing with Hubble, and it's a yellow mirror because it's made by gold, a tiny surface of gold, in order to protect the telescope from the cold temperatures from space, because it's going to be in space, unreachable. And this is something that makes us very anxious, because if it has some malfunction, NASA won't be able to fix it. Hubble was able to be fixed because it was circling Earth very closely on our reach, but the James Webb Space Telescope will be out of our reach. So let's hope everything works out, and this telescope could bring us secrets that we couldn't even imagine a few years ago. So this is how big it is. It's bigger than a tennis court. It has to go folded into a rocket to the space and unfold in space, because it doesn't fit in any rocket we are able to build right now. And his field, his reach, will be much deeper through time than Hubble ultra deep field. We are going to be able to see the universe 200 million years after the Big Bang. The universe as a baby, the first stars maybe were being formed, and that approaches us from God, from creation, and that's so exciting that we can bring these informations to us. And I can't wait to see the pictures and the images and the information and the scientific discoveries that this telescope could bring us. But somebody in the 19th century named Camille Flammarion had predicted that. So he wrote in his book Urania that new methods will reveal the physical-chemical constitution of the celestial bodies, the nature of the atmosphere. So Camille was a pioneer in this idea, and he was so ahead of his time that he was able to bring us the notion that there were many more worlds than our solar system could hold. Distant worlds with life. And this is what I meant in the beginning of the talk about how important this philosophy is to us, how important this idea of the plurality of the inhabited worlds is scientifically, philosophically, and religiously. What are the scientific, philosophical, and religious consequences of discovering life on other planets? So Jesus was the one who said, there are many dwellings in my Father's house, and Allan Kardec developed that idea. In the Gospel, according to Spiritism, chapter 3, Allan Kardec will also bring a classification of those worlds. Some worlds are more developed than others in the moral aspect, so only pure spirits could inhabit those worlds, and our world is a world of, I always forget this expression in English, of proofs and expiation. I'm sure João and Jussara will correct me in the background, but I always forget about this expression in English. But this is a word where we can find suffering, pain, and we are submitted to tests, and we have to be approved, get good grades in those tests. The test of patience, the test of charity, the test of forgiveness, the test of tolerance, the test of mutual respect. So we have to be approved in those tests in order to live in other worlds where matter don't matter, where matter don't matter anymore. And Flammarion, in his books, he describes a lot of worlds in that way, where matter don't matter anymore. And the consequences of that is very important, because let's imagine that we have a world with another humankind. So who created this humankind? Are them our brothers? If they are our brothers, our siblings, do we have the same father? So who is our father? Is it God? If God is our common Father, so life on Earth is not the only one. If life on Earth is not the only one, if there is life in another planet, can we migrate and get to know those people that live in other planets? And if we can do that, how could we do that? Can we go there with our material bodies? Could we go there with our spirits, our soul? So this brings us the idea that man in our planet is not the center of the universe. And that brings us a sense of humbleness that puts us in our place, that we are not more important than other humanities, that, in the words of Camille Flammarion, that we are citizens of the sky, citizens of the universe. So can we all think together the implications, the scientific implications of that, the scientific developments concerning starships, ways to that science will bring us to resist radiation that we could apply in our planet, different ways to cultivate food in order to cultivate food in other planets that we could also apply in our planets. Science could develop techniques for communication that we could apply in our planet in order to use to communicate to other planets. So imagine how this idea could create a scientific boom, a scientific progress in our society, in our world, because of the idea of many worlds inhabited. And philosophically and religiously, we have those questions that we already mentioned. So are we alone? Are we more important than other humanities of other worlds? Let's put ourselves in our place. Let's develop in our hearts this sense of humbleness and find God and his laws and his creation in everything we see when we look at the sky at night. God reveals himself to us in his work in motion, as Flammarion says. God reveals his work in motion when we look at the sky every night. So the plurality of the inhabited worlds is a doctrine that we should all study and worry about. If you are not worried about the plurality of the inhabited worlds, you should be, because it would change the way you look at life, the way you live your life, and it would help you to be a humbler person, to love your brother and your sister as you should love God and yourself. It would help you be a better Christian. So I thank you, my friends, for listening to me, for taking your time. And I think I am done here. I think I have spoken more than I should, over 1 hour. So I give it back to Jussara and João so we can finish this conversation. Thank you very much. May God bless us all and help us to recognize how humble we should be in front of the universe and in front of himself. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Vicente. That was absolutely fantastic. We could hear you much more, but we have so many questions. I think we should go straight to the questions to benefit even more from, everything you can bring and clarify to us. So let's start with the first question. Considering that you yourself belong to the scientific community, Could you correlate perhaps your experience as a spiritist in the medical community and perhaps expand on the experience of Flammarion as an astronomer and a spiritist?
Very good question. And this question, we are used to answer this question because for some reason it's unusual for people to see a person who is, I don't consider myself a scientist, but actually I'm not a scientist who makes science, who brings new information. I only read other people's work. So I'm not a scientist in the way that I do not produce scientific information. But I am a physician, and it's a scientific environment, and it's unusual for people to see a spiritist working in this environment because it's so common for scientists and people who live in this environment to be atheists, who do not believe in God. So this question is very usual for us every time, and sometimes you have to make a point. You have to mark your position. As Jesus said to Publius Lentulus in the book 2,000 years ago, you find yourself now a reference point when they met each other face by face. And you have the chance to get this point and transform yourself in your life. So you have to make that point at some point in your life. And I find my colleagues very respectful. Maybe they don't believe, maybe they think we are dreamers, but they are very respectful. And I will bring this information about Flammarion because he faced the same problem in his works. There is a very good example of that. He used to speak out about his ideas. He was not afraid to say to the scientific community that he believed in the immortality of the soul, that he believed in the plurality of the inhabited worlds, and he did not run away from debate. There is a book that he wrote, a very deep book in terms of philosophy and theology, and a very beautiful book called God in Nature, where he will defend his ideas about God in nature, why he believes there should be a creator. And at some point in that book, he brings the idea about a philosopher, a very famous philosopher in Europe at that time. He is so famous that I am mad at myself that I forgot his name. All of us know him. If I say his name, everybody will know who I'm talking about, but I forgot his name right now. And he calls up this philosopher to a debate. Let's debate publicly about God, because his philosopher is an atheist. He does not believe in God. He believes that science had put God underground, had buried God. And Camille calls him to debate because he was not afraid to speak out about speak out about his ideas. So this is what we try to do in medicine. Not only me and others that you all know, the medical association, Medical Spiritists Association, they all try to do that job to bring spiritism into academy, into the universities, and we believe that would bring a lot of progress to humankind. Medicine would be seen in another way. Patients would be treated in a very different way, and maybe more efficiently. And that's what Flammarion tried to bring, this scientific aspect of spirituality. And he did a pretty good job on that, actually, because he was well known as a scientist. He had a very good work in astronomy, very well respected. He was the founder of the French Astronomer Society, which is a lot, which is a very important astronomy society. And he had books about astronomy, who taught astronomy to students, including our Euripides Barçanufo here, used his books to teach his students. So he was very important scientist in Europe. And when you see a very important scientist defending those ideas, that makes you question yourself. If this guy is so intelligent, so smart, and he's so important, and he believes in that, there should be something rational on that. Should I read his work? Should I believe in that as well? So I think, I'm not sure if I answered the question, but I think it's kind of in this way.
Oh, absolutely. The thing is, Vicente, I think overall what you're saying, and it was perhaps what Camille Flammarion already thought about it, is like, keep an open mind.
Yes, exactly. And I just remember the name of the philosopher that he was. It was Comte, Auguste Comte.
Auguste Comte, the positivist. Wow.
Yes, yes. And he was challenging him for a debate, so he was not afraid. So
wow.
I have a post on that on Instagram that I'll show you here, the picture of both of them.
Yeah.
And the saying where Camille challenges him, of course, he challenged him in his book, written, because he reveals us that he was not very fond of public discussions, verbal. He used his pen to spread his ideas. He was stronger using his pen to spread his ideas, but that's it. He was not afraid at all. And maybe we should do that as well. We should talk more about spiritism and spirituality, maybe with people that we believe won't care, but the seed is planted. Maybe one day it will generate a big tree with flowers and perfume and so on.
That's so wonderful. Let's go to another question. Yasko, hi Yasko, good to have you here. I wonder if Flammarion ideas and writings were ahead of the mainstream science that ostracized and denied the Spiritism as a whole, not only its scientific, but philosophical and especially religious moral aspects.
Well, that's a very important question. And also, it's a very common question when we talk about Flammarion, because this is maybe one of the reasons that Spiritists don't study him very much. They study a lot Leon Denis, Gabriel Delany, and Kardec himself. But they don't study Flammarion because there is this general idea that he denied Spiritism at one point, and all the phenomena were fake and so on. Well, actually, after many years studying his work and his life, I really do not believe that he denied everything. At some point, he denied some aspects of the phenomena, but not all of them. He strongly believed that the phenomena, the tables spinning, and the communication of spirits were real. But as I said in the beginning of my talk, he did not believe in everybody who was making that. He has a great book. It is here by my side. The unknown forces of nature, where he describes those phenomena, and he has a clear theory that those phenomena could be made by spirits, and he has a whole chapter on fraud, mediums that were caught in fraud. So he was not easy to convince. I cannot believe that he denied everything. When we see, when we read his works, by the end of his life, he has a book that was published just a few months before he passed away. And in this book, he's still arguing in favor of the mortality of the soul, the communicability of spirits, and so on. He was even invited to be the president of the Parisian Spiritist Society when Allan Kardec passed away. He was invited by Madame Kardec, Amélie Kardec, and he refused to be the president because he wanted to keep going with his scientific research on spiritism and astronomy. So I do agree that sometimes it sounds strange that he could have denied some aspects of the phenomena, but I do not agree that he died denying it. And he had a great contribution. Allan Kardec considered him a lot, and even Leon Denis was asking for him to speak at the opening of the International Congress of Spiritism in 1925. So it's hard to believe that after reading everything, not everything, but much of his work, that he denied Spiritism. So that's my point of view. I respect others, but I'm open to discussion.
But it's understandable, because when we think about the context, when the time that he lived, we are talking about phenomena that were provoked, so to say, more with an entertainment view. And also, for trivial purposes, curiosity. So I can only imagine that many of them, and I mean, thinking about a mind such as the mind of Camille Flammarion, very rational, but at the same time open and true to what he was witnessing, that he also witnessed so much, fake phenomena and the hoax, like we say, that he had to position himself as well for, sometimes, or in certain circumstances, as showing and even trying to prevent others to go into all those fakes. And Kardec, in the Spiritist Review, he shows that constantly about all this fake phenomena that people were faking, right?
Yeah, and we have to consider also that mediums at that time, they charged for their services. So when a medium was invited to a house to produce the phenomena, the medium was feeling pressured for the phenomenon to happen. And it's not like that things work. It depends on the spirits. So in order to make the phenomenon happen, sometimes they made frauds. And Camille was there with full attention. He invited all the famous mediums from Europe to his house. The sessions happened at his house in the presence of friends like Delany, for example. And he caught every one of them in fraud. Every one of them, including the famous one. For example, Eusapia Palladino, the great Italian medium, she was caught in fraud in front of him. And she smiled. She smiled at him. She recognized that she was caught in fraud. But that does not mean the phenomenon wasn't real, because most of the time the phenomenon was real. She was not in fraud. So this is why he was so skeptical when some spiritists came to him and said, did you see that? Did you see that? I don't believe. I believe if I search, if I touch, if I experiment, if I watch, in ideal conditions where fraud could be avoided, and he prepared his living room against fraud in order to avoid it and to take real conclusions that were true. So this is why maybe people believe that he denied some aspects of Spiritism, which I don't believe deeply, actually.
Yeah, I think, Vicente, let's see if you agree with me, that he absolutely believed in the phenomena, but he didn't believe it in everyone that would bring supposed phenomenon. Like even when we mentioned Eusapia Palladino, for those who do not know, was a very famous medium, studied by the most renowned scientists of her time, Italian, and she was actually genuine. She was a very potent medium, so to say. But she was the one that used to say that sometimes she would prefer to fake because the way they practiced mediumship at the time as well was very exhausting for the mediums. And sometimes she said that she felt so exhausted. She had so much side effect for not, following what we spiritists understanding being as a good protocol for you to exercise your mediumship. And she would be really feeling that so bad that sometimes she would say, what, I'm going to fake here and there because I don't have to deal with the side effects to me. But it's a phenomenal medium, and I mean, and the purpose of spiritism is exactly what Camille was trying to show all the time, that we want real phenomena, and there are plenty. There is no need for people to fake it. Let's see another question here. I think what do you think of the idea that Camille Flammarion and Galileo Galilei was the same spirit?
Daniel, my friend, that's a very tricky question. That's a very tricky question. Well, I have my personal view on the subject, which I tend to do not share. But there is this idea that they were the same spirit. Galileo wrote some messages through Camille as a medium, and those messages were, as we said in our talk, were put by Kardec in Genesis chapter 6. And both were astronomers. Both wrote books very similar in the structure of the book, like dialogues and astronomical ideas. And we also know that it's possible that those messages that Camille worked as a medium could have been written by himself being Galileo, bringing his ideas from the past. Allan Kardec describes it in the Medium's book, that this is possible as well. So some people say that they were not the same person because Galileo wrote through Camille's mediumship. But it is possible for a person to open his memories from the past and bring his own ideas in mediumship. Kardec wrote about that. So I will leave it to you, my friend, to take your own conclusions. Maybe he was, maybe he was not. I have my own opinion about that, and I will keep it safe inside my heart.
Okay, let's go to another one. Leon is questioning. In my classes, I find it very difficult to make people really understand, comprehend, and internalize the size of our universe. Could you advise us on how to do this?
Yes, I recommend the reading of 2 books. The first one is Lumen, The Story of a Soul by Camille Flammarion. And the other one is a book also by Camille Flammarion, which is, in Portuguese, Sonhos Estelares, or Star Dreams, maybe?
Stellar Dreams.
Stellar Dreams, maybe, where he will describe the size of the universe in a way that you would never see in another book. And if you want a scientific book, not by Camille, I recommend this book, Big Bang. This one is in Portuguese, but you could also find it in English because it's originally in English, by Simon Singh, which is a physician. Wrong, it's a physics, right? Physics. Physics. And he describes the story of all the information we have about the universe, from the ancient Greek to recent time. Because this kind of information, this kind of idea that you asked, how to convince people, how to advise people how big the universe is, this is so personal. And it depends on so much on how much people know about science, about the universe, about physics, that it's very hard to bring these ideas into the mind of someone who thinks in a very closed way. So these books, they will try to open people's mind, and I recommend reading them. That's no other way. I mean,
yeah. Okay, thank you. I guess we have time just for one more. Do the science consider the spirit's theories of a type of science?
Yes. Of course, not all scientists consider that, believe in that, but there is a growing field of scientists studying that, considering that some things could only be explained by spiritist theory. And we have the chance to know and read the works of many of those scientists, including Brazil. For example, we have Alexander Moreira Almeida. We have a Canadian, Mario Beauregard, which is a neuroscientist. We have a Dutch scientist, which is Dr. Pim van Lommel, a cardiologist who studies near-death experience, and many others. It's not hard to find them if we search in the scientific literature, but of course, we have to be honest and say that they are a minority right now. But these ideas are growing, and they are getting to the point that they cannot explain some kinds of phenomena and some kind of effects without studying a different cause for them. So I strongly believe that we will get to the point where the scientific community will be spiritualized. Maybe we are not going to see that in our current life, but we are not in a hurry, right? We have the whole time of the universe in order to get there.
Okay, so we are approaching the end of our presentation today. Before we ask Vicente to say his final words, we would like to invite you next week. We are going to have David Cohen, which is he is the co-director of the Spiritist Group of Montana, and he's going to be talking to us about learning to apply the golden rule. So it's going to be a very interesting talk, and having our friend here from the Spiritist Group of Montana, David Cohen, to talk to us. Vicente, if you have your final words before we go to our prayers.
Well, my final words are directed for those who do not study the doctrine of the plurality of inhabited worlds. They should study it. It's fun. We learn a lot. I see a great connection with the gospel with the moral laws of the universe. It will make you feel better. It will bring you tools to forgive more, to respect more, to follow the gospel in a more appropriate way. So I thank you, Jussara, João, Daniel, for this invitation, and I hope I have helped clarifying some things about Flammarion's life and his relationship with Kardec and spirituality. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It was fascinating. So we would like to invite you all for our final prayer. It's the moment where we connect our souls with the universe, with all the forces of the universe, with all the beings that inhabit our beautiful universe and that we still know so little about. So at this moment, as brothers and sisters that we are, as being creation that came from the love of our Creator, we unite our thoughts, we unite our hearts, asking that we may be capable of taking advantage of this time that we are living on earth, that is teaching us so much through pain, through challenges, but also through beautiful and enlightening moments such as this one that we have shared together. May we keep our hearts in peace, sending out hope to the world, and being always ready to contribute with whatever we can provide to appease the pains of our brothers and sisters. We are very thankful for all the spiritual benefactors that have been assisting and guiding us in this work, and that we may continue being of service to spread love and enlightenment in our world. So have a good afternoon, everyone, and we'll meet you again next week. And don't forget, on June 5 and 6, we are going to be having our symposium. It's the 15th symposium this year. And because of the celebration of 160 years of the Medium's book, we are going to be talking about mediums and mediumship. And there is so much for us to still talk about it and learn. So don't miss this opportunity. Stay tuned with us. Bye.